Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints for SEC Extra and D1 Baseball. Joe Healy here, as always, to get you caught up on what happened Saturday around the SEC. We're going to take a look ahead at Sunday's action in the conference. Before we get started on anything there, I got to let you know that our Sunday episodes of Weekend Waypoints, as always, are presented by Active Wealth Management. Ford Stokes and Sam Davis are my guys over there at Active Wealth Management. A few little items there. As someone who is not the most financially savvy myself, I always have my handy dandy notes here that Ford passed along for me to kind of pass along to you about things available to you through Active Wealth Management. You will learn how to generate a higher income from the income portion of your retirement nest egg and let the rest of your assets grow. You will learn how to protect the essential part of your nest egg 100% from financial market loss. You will learn that you can get a fiduciary to fight for you so you can enjoy your retirement. And you will learn what private wealth management looks like and get access to products you did not know were available. So we always ask that, if it's something you're in the market for, support the folks who support us, support Active Wealth Management, Ford Stokes, Sam Davis. We have our call to action there at the bottom. As always, visit activewealth.com and click schedule a consultation to get a free 401k review, which is a $1,500 value at no cost to you. Again, activewealth.com. Excuse me. All right, folks, let's get to the baseball. Kind of a crazy day around the SEC. Whereas Friday's action felt like a little straightforward. Most of the wins were comfortable and not a lot of down to the wire stuff. Yesterday was a totally different animal. Let's get to our game of the day. Of course, it has to be. There were some other great games in the conference yesterday. Of course, we'll get to those. But the game of the day has to be Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Went late into the night. And this game, I think, even if it hadn't been down to the wire necessarily or extra innings, because the same game went to extra innings, I think it was an instant classic in that it had everything you're looking for in kind of a rivalry game like this. It was a great crowd. It was a good atmosphere. It was kind of a scratch and claw type affair, obviously, with a 10-9 final score, Ole Miss 10, Mississippi State 9. You had the back and forth element. You had unsung heroes. You had, star players doing star player things. It was just everything you would have wanted in a rivalry game going late into the night between two teams that are really trying to kind of change narratives about their last couple of seasons. There was a level of kind of desperation almost there. Let's pull up the box score for it so we can kind of follow along here. Yeah, so here we go. We'll look here so we can see the line score. So it goes to extra innings. The team's trade runs in the 11th. State scores in the 12th. Ole Miss gets 2 in the bottom of the 12th to walk it off. A Jackson Ross 2-run single there. But, I mean, really, so much happened leading up to that point. You had, an 11th inning home run from Hunter Hines, and the ball was just tattooed. Like, I don't think anybody in the outfield moved. I mean, that's how hard this ball was hit. Some of the reactions were great in the moment. So Hines hits it. There's a fan behind home plate, kind of to the left-hand batter's box side of home plate. And pretty much as soon as the ball hits Hines' bats, he puts his hand up like this. From the open side of Hines' swing, you can see Mike Bianco in the background, and Hines swings and Bianco kind of like leans back like this because he just knows exactly where it's going. But then his team ties it in the bottom of the 11th. Then top of the 12th, Johnny Long, our old friend Johnny Long. Remember about this time last week, we were talking about Johnny Long being ejected from that crazy game between State and Georgia. He hits a solo home run to left field. Does frankly, a gratuitous bat flip, but he takes the bat, 75 feet up the first base line, flings it in the air. And then as he comes across home plate, he has like a little extra for the Ole Miss dugout. Which by the letter of the law, and this was, I was unclear on this, but Kyle Peterson on the ESPN broadcast mentioned it, that, by the letter of the law, a bat flip towards an opposing dugout is supposed to be an ejection. That's something they're trying to kind of cut down on. They're trying to, I mean, frankly, thread the needle. Let's be honest. They're trying to thread the needle between we don't want to be the fun police and take everything away, but also we don't need escalating tensions, especially in this league where every game is high strung and most of them are close and so on and so forth. So anyway, so Bianco runs out there. There was a a hot mic moment where you heard a couple F bombs from Mike Bianco, and so he gets tossed, so he's gone. But then in the bottom of the 11th, we get the walk off from Jackson Ross after State loaded the bases there. So just a really fun game. There, I mean, there were some. If you're State or Ole Miss fan, there were some negatives. I mean, neither starter was very good. Liam Doyle didn't get helped by the Ole Miss defense, but it's not like he was stellar otherwise. It wasn't Jerangelo Sainja's best start. I think he'll bounce back. I'm not overly worried about that, given how good he's been this year. But it was a theme for Ole Miss. Ole Miss escapes with a win, but it did continue the theme for Ole Miss this season of the defense and the catching not being very solid, and then that's kind of an issue. So, but again, they get the win in dramatic fashion and a big rubber match today. But between the two, obviously, Ole Miss needs it in the worst possible way, not just for this season, but also again because they haven't won a series against State since 2015. But also, if you're State, you want to continue to stack these series wins because I mean they're in position where look, you keep winning these series against these 50-50 series like last weekend against Georgia, this weekend against Ole Miss. Suddenly you're starting to talk about State being in the hosting mix. We still have a little ways to go before we can start to really break that down. But State certainly, if they can continue to stack wins like this, is going to be in that conversation. As we know, you get to 16 wins in the SEC and you start to enter into that conversation. And that's within striking distance for State if they continue at this pace. Fun game in Oxford. Let's look at some comments here. Jeremy Scott on Facebook, almost always the first one in here. Roll Tide, he says. Rubber game today after win over number 1 Arkansas last night. Yeah, we'll have more on that in a minute. Fun game last night with Arkansas and Alabama. Another extra inning game between Arkansas and Alabama. Some hero stuff there. TJ McCants. Good for him. A guy who's not swung it as well in SEC play as he did early in the season. Some hero stuff for them. After, frankly, a deflating moment. I mean, Alabama's just about ready to win this thing. Alton Davis is on the mound, and he gives up a 2-out home run, 1 out away from winning it. And Arkansas ties the game. And so that's a little bit of that's hard to bounce back from when you're that close and the air kind of comes out of the balloon. So kudos to Alabama for fighting back in that instance, because that, like I said, that's just not easy to do. Carl Dunn on YouTube, our buddy who's in here all the time. He says, "Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Carl. LSU baseball is now at a crossroads. 5 straight series losses. Yeah. Hard to know what to say there. I mean, I think we talked yesterday, Carl, about, Jay Johnson's just trying everything and nothing's quite working. That's still true, obviously. And it's hard because in a vacuum, a series loss on the road at Tennessee, you're like, well, okay, like, sure. Like Tennessee's a, top 5 team, but in the context of this entire LSU season, it's frustrating that, and I think Chris Burke made this point on the broadcast last night, that you feel pretty good that you've held the Tennessee offense to whatever it is, 9 runs over 2 games. That's well under their average. So you've pitched it well enough to win, and you just can't do enough offensively, and that's frustrating when you felt you've played well enough to win, generally speaking. So yeah, 5 straight series losses. I think I heard the stat, and you can correct me if somebody in the chat has it, but first time that's happened, 5 straight series losses for LSU since like 1977, which is before LSU was LSU, frankly, as a program in college baseball. So it's pretty unprecedented what LSU is dealing with right now. And it'll be interesting to see how they deal with this, right? Because while they're talented, we talk every week about like they're talented, wouldn't be surprised to make a run. Like at some point, they have to decide what they want their season to be, and how they're going to respond here. Because and it's hard because you come into the season, whether I mean, clearly we were off on LSU projections early this season by ranking them as high as we did, but we did. And so LSU comes into the season, as much as coaches say that, and even players say, "Oh, we don't really pay attention to that." Like you can't not at least know where you're ranked, right? I mean, you're not living in a bubble. Um, you know, it says it on game notes. It says it on social media, like the game day posts on social media. Like it says what you're ranked. You can't avoid that number. And so it's kind of tough at some point to not just pack it up because some of those LSU players, it's easy to fall into like, well, wasted lost season. Like we're not gonna win a national title. So what's the? It's just it's just a hard thing to to bounce back from. And Armstrong Graveling on YouTube says, "Joe, I scraped my knee this morning and purple blood came out. It ain't over yet. Go Tigers." I like your attitude there, Armstrong. I mean, look, the team is talented enough. They played well enough twice to beat Tennessee in general and just didn't quite do enough. So yeah, I mean, good for you for honestly having belief. I know a lot of fans are frustrated with it. I'm sure you're frustrated with it. You can have belief and be frustrated. I think you and Carl probably share in that. So, but another tough loss yesterday for LSU. Uh, Trent Donnell or Donald, excuse me, on that on YouTube said, "Ag said want to see me do it again." Yeah, another blowout win for Texas A&M. Um, yeah, I mean, this is related to Devin Smith on YouTube says Arkansas, A&M, and everyone else, and yeah, I generally agree. I mean, throw Kentucky in there, and I get it. I too think Arkansas and A&M are cut above, but like 14-1, or yeah, 14-1 is 14-1. It's on some level. So I think you have to throw Kentucky into that mix. Jeff True on X says Cats are officially first in the SEC. Somebody take a screenshot. Yeah, it's like they're partying like it's 2006, right? I mean, I remember that I was young, but that 2006 Kentucky team that kind of came out of nowhere to win the SEC. We'll see if Kentucky has to play Arkansas this season. This weekend they're playing Tennessee. Oh, by the way, I will be there in Lexington for that series. So who knows if they can win the SEC, but they're they control their destiny, to use a phrase that I don't really care for. But yeah, so yeah, if you're a Kentucky fan, yeah, man, take a screenshot. Like walk around with a little swagger. Like your team is playing really well, and yesterday's game was a great example of that. Yeah, you're down 7-0 in the third. Like that's a game you just 99 times out of 100 you just lose. Period. And Auburn struggling on the mound is a big part of it. I'm not gonna lie to you about that. But the offense, this offense can come back in a way that last year's offense couldn't. And I do wonder if yesterday's game is a game that Kentucky does not win last year because they just don't have the firepower to come through with it. But this team is swinging it well. And you saw it with the home runs. James McCoy, Ryan Nicholson, Nick Lopez hits 2 monster home runs. So that I think that is another sign that like this is a little bit of a different animal with Kentucky. And so that the storyline of us, small ball and defense and like, yeah, they still do those things well, but like, underestimate their offense at your own peril at this point. I haven't checked the updated stats, but they went into the weekend third in SEC play in home runs. And they're probably, they hit several more yesterday. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they come out of the weekend higher in the rankings there. So first place, Kentucky Wildcats. There you go. Halfway through SEC play. All right, let me quickly get through some of those. Some of these other ones. Speaking of Kentucky, Clay Wilkie on YouTube found your show yesterday. Thanks for finding it, Clay. I appreciate that. And I'm back this morning. Thank you. Cats fan, chances UK wins the league with their schedule second half. Yeah, Clay, I would still put them behind Arkansas. But at this point, and they have to play Arkansas. Now it's at home. So like that helps. It's in Lexington. Arkansas's pitching is just such a cut above everyone else this season. Like it feels like everyone can hit, right? Like every lineup in the SEC is feels like they're loaded offensively. Now there are exceptions, obviously, but you get my point. but pitching is harder to come by these days. And so Arkansas being a cut above everyone else on the mound feels like a differentiator in a way that having the best offense, whether that's Tennessee or A&M, whoever you think it is, that's not as much of a differentiator. So I'll put their odds behind Arkansas, but I think that's probably it. And if you're an A&M fan out there, and I know there's a couple of you guys in here, A&M's already a couple losses behind the pace. And so that's kind of why I put Kentucky there. And also, oh, by the way, as Sean Miller mentions on YouTube, that A&M versus Woo Pig series to end the year, SEC knew what they were doing, scheduling that at the very end. I agree. Must-watch TV. So you've got that series. So A&M's already a couple losses off the pace, and they also have to go through Arkansas. So it's less that I don't think A&M is the better team. It's just more that, Kentucky just has a head start, right? So there's that. So good question there, Clay. I like that. Jeremy Moody on YouTube. Are any teams in Louisiana ranked? Yes, that is the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. They are ranked 19th currently. I believe I saw some of the game yesterday. I just kind of randomly turned it on for a minute. They beat Marshall 1-0 yesterday. I think they won that series. So yeah, playing really well. Deggs has his team playing well. And speaking of pitching, like those dudes can really pitch it. Like I guess there's a chance they end up hosting. Obviously, I'm not as up to that up on the RPI stuff as my colleague Mark Etheridge is, but I guess they could end up hosting. But if they don't, like that is a 2 seed that's probably going to go to an SEC number 1 that you absolutely want no part of. The Cajuns. I mean, that's true most years with the Cajuns, but like I think especially this year because those dudes can pitch, and that tends to be the difference in like a Sun Belt team versus a SEC team. The Sun Belt team can usually hit, but one that can pitch like that is a different deal altogether. So they'll be someone you do not want. Final comment here before we move on. William Cantrell on YouTube. What is your thoughts on Tennessee going with the opener strategy and having some success with that compared to what we've seen the last few seasons? It feels off. I'll put that on there just because it was a longer question. Yeah, it is an adjustment, right? Because you've been a little bit, I don't say this in a bad way, but you've been spoiled, right? With Dolander, Burns, and Beam for the last couple of years. But I give Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson a lot of credit for looking at the personnel and saying, this is what's going to give us a chance to win. And it helps that you have guys in the bullpen who can do that. Whether it's Causey moving back to the bullpen full time, and then obviously Nate Snead, you've got a couple guys who you can stretch out like that. So yeah, I say it's working. Like, and as long as it's working, then go for it. But I think the bigger point with Tennessee's pitching is that they understand that it's just we're going to have to do it differently. We're not going to try to make Xander Sechrist be Drew Beam, right? And we saw what Drew Beam did yesterday. We'll talk about that in a second. So he's still capable of that, but they're not trying to put square pegs in round holes, right? They're like, we have this personnel. We know we're pretty confident we can get 4 good ones, 3 good ones out of Sechrist, and then we're just going to, boom, we're going to move on to whoever's next. With Chris Stamos, we knew that was going to be a short start. So you get 2 2/3 pretty good innings out of him. Boom, we're on to the next before things can kind of blow up in our faces. So I like it because it shows a willingness to just say, hey, you know what? Like this team's different. We're going to figure it out. And this offense is good enough that if we can just contain opposing offenses, we're going to win a lot of ball games. All right. I'll cut Armstrong and Sean. I see other comments there. I'm going to move on. I'll come back to yours here in just a minute, but we'll move on to some player of the day stuff here. Okay. As always, I will name some candidates and then we'll talk about the actual player of the day. We'll use all this as a jumping off point to talk about some of the individual games. In a losing effort, Eric Guevara for Auburn. Interesting story. 3 for 5, double and a home run. This guy didn't play till March 26th this season, but he has come on and played a little more lately and had a nice day yesterday for Auburn, an Auburn team that got off to a fast start before the pitching struggled, and Kentucky ran away with that one there. Also in a losing effort, Jarrett Curtis of Missouri, 3 for 4, 2 stolen bases. When he's on base, he changes the complexion of that Missouri offense because he can really, really run. Might be the fastest guy in the SEC, just straight line speed. Paul Tates on the winning side in that series, Georgia winning the finale against Missouri, a series win that they had to have if they were going to, it felt like they had to have, not in a literal sense, but it felt like they had to have if they're going to be serious about ending up on the right side of things with regards to the postseason. And they're still in that mix. But Tate's 2 for 3 with a double and a walk. Another tough loss for Florida. Made a game comeback. They made a push late, but lose it. A couple good games there, though. Ty Evans, 4 for 4, 2 doubles and a home run. Luke Heyman, 3 for 4 with a double. On the winning side of that game, Dalton Reeves, Presbyterian transfer, who hasn't played a ton this year, but 2 for 3 with a home run, a walk, and 3 runs batted in as the DH. South Carolina wins that series. That's a huge series win for South Carolina, a team that we were starting to ask questions of the last couple of weeks, like, hey, what are you really? We had you ranked, and then you weren't, and not quite sure what to make of you. Was the Vanderbilt sweep a real thing, or is it just that Vanderbilt was awful that weekend? This kind of helps us understand that, okay, South Carolina is solid. Now, what their ceiling is, we'll see, but they can take advantage of a Florida team that's obviously really, really going through it right now. Billy Amick for Tennessee, 2 for 4, a double and a home run. That was a big home run late in that game against LSU. Peyton Holt for Arkansas, and again, a losing effort, 3 for 4 with a home run. On the winning side of that game, Cade Snell for Alabama, 3 for 5 with 2 doubles. Vanderbilt, not a good day offensively, but Davis Diaz went 3 for 3, so there's that. And then in that finale that we talked about earlier of the day, Ethan Leger for Ole Miss, 3 for 6 with a double, a home run. Campbell Smithwick, 3 for 5 with a double. And then Jackson Ross, the hero of the game, 3 for 5 with 2 doubles and 2 walks. But the player of the day is Nick Lopez for Kentucky, 3 for 5, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, and a great mustache as always. He hit the home run that gave Kentucky its first lead of the day, then hit a home run to give them some insurance later in the game, a titanic home run, the second one. So a big day for Nick Lopez. I will move on. We'll get to the comments that were left here in just a second. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to pitcher of the day real quick. Some candidates here: Drew Beam, 6 2/3 innings pitched, 8 hits, 1 run. It was unearned, 3 walks and 5 strikeouts. Luke Holman on the other side of that matchup, 5 2/3 innings, 2 hits, 2 runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. Colton Smith in relief for Georgia, and in relief for this week, but would not be shocked to see him start a game coming up next weekend and beyond. Obviously, he started some last year for Georgia, but in relief, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 runs. No, they were both unearned. No walks, 10 strikeouts for him. Beautiful breaking ball, Colton Smith, if you've not seen him. Mason Molina, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 runs, no walks, 6 strikeouts. Greg Ferrone for Alabama, 5 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. But the pitcher of the day is Tanner Jones from Texas A&M, the guy who, frankly, has been the weakest of the 3 links in the A&M rotation, but really turned in a gem of a start yesterday. 7 1/3 scoreless, 6 hits, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. That's big for A&M because they're going to need him. Prager and Lampkin have been pretty solid. Jones had struggled. Had been a little more up and down, had struggled to get deep into games. Yesterday, obviously, a big step forward. Game of the day today, Arkansas and Alabama. Would be a huge series win for Alabama, obviously, against the number 1 team in the country. A team just hanging on to the top 25 is Alabama. Still not sure exactly what we have there. They've got some good series wins. They've got some kind of demoralizing series losses. The offense has kind of taken a step back. We're not really sure what to make of the pitching because Ben Hess has struggled. Alton Davis hasn't necessarily been as dominant at the back end as we would have thought. So a lot of questions about Alabama, but man, if you win a series against number 1 Arkansas, like obviously that's a huge feather in your cap and kind of sets them on a course where maybe they can use that as a jumping off point. Arkansas, of course, Brady Tigert on the mound, going to be a tough customer for Alabama, looking to continue to rack up these wins and at least keep pace. Now, they're a full game behind Kentucky, but at least keep pace with Kentucky in the SEC standings, which is a fun sentence to say, especially if you're a Kentucky Wildcats fan. All right, last couple comments here. Armstrong's on YouTube says, "Hear me out, Joe. All the talk of Arkansas pitching rotation isn't better than 2023 Florida. Yeah, Sproat, Waldrop, and then Cags. Yeah, 2023 Wake. Yeah, and 2023 Tennessee, and that's just off the top of my head. Thoughts? Yeah, certainly those 3. Yes, I think your point is well taken. I think that's an interesting just bigger picture thought about college baseball in 2024 is we don't have those superstar rotations this year for whatever reason. We thought Wake was going to have one again, right? They haven't been all that. They've been better lately, but they just haven't been as good. So that's one aspect of it. But yeah, I think it is interesting that Arkansas, has kind of the best pitching staff and arguably the best rotation, maybe far and away in the country, but it wouldn't necessarily be that if this was last year, right? That is interesting. You bring up a good big picture thought that we've talked about here at D1 Baseball internally, just how it doesn't seem like there are those superstar pitching staffs this year. And then Sean Miller coming back in on YouTube, A&M fan here. UK clearly has the easier path to the SEC crown. At this point, doesn't hurt my feelings for people to say it. Yeah, that's what it is. The path is so important, and especially when UK has a couple of games at hand there. Top 3 national seed is more important than the conference title. Also agree on that. Conference title banners, or in baseball's case, little adhesives on the wall. Conference title labels are nice to put on the wall, but yes, if you're a team that fancies itself a national title contender, and A&M is, that is more important than the conference title, as nice as it would be to have both, of course. So, all right, that is going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints. Thanks everyone for joining, for coming into the YouTube and on Facebook and X and playing along and chiming in here today. I always appreciate the back and forth. That's my favorite part of this deal. So I appreciate you all doing that. I will come to you again next Friday, leading off Weekend Waypoints. My episode next Friday will be coming to you live from Lexington, Kentucky. And by the way, live after my afternoon at the Keeneland racetrack. Going to the horse races next Friday afternoon. Going to put down a modest bet because your boy, not much of a gambler. And also I'm not trying to, I'm just ignorant on the ponies, as they say. So, but going to be a fun, quintessential Lexington thing to do, to go to Keeneland. So going to do that in the afternoon. Going to go back to my hotel, record Weekend Waypoints, and then go to the opener of Kentucky, Tennessee that evening. So I'll talk to you then next Friday. Enjoy today's baseball, everyone. Thanks for joining.